When did, if it doesn't apply, let it fly, stop applying? Why are you defending shit that doesn't matter to you? Babies, if there's something I want to stick with you today, let it be that simple, very cliche that we all grew up with, okay?
Welcome to Accepted Addictions with pDubs. Get ready to immerse yourself in a podcast that's open to people of all stripes and persuasions. Accepted Addictions is not just a podcast, it's a movement. We go over societal norms that are considered acceptable, but are often toxic to our growth, development, and even behavior. This is a platform where we explore the multifaceted identities within ourselves, recognizing that some versions have it all figured out, while others lean into that negativity. This is Accepted Addictions, where every version of you, every evolution of you, is not just embraced, but celebrated. So sit back, open your ears, grab a drink. You know I'll be sipping on my kombucha and prepare for an engaging journey.
Why everything that's supposed to be bad make me feel so good? Everything they told me not to was exactly what I would. Man, I tried to stop, man. I tried the best I could, but make me smile. What's your addiction?
Welcome back to another episode of Accepted Addictions. Whew. Have you ever met someone who's always got like something going on, whether it be like a new betrayal, enemy at work, a new friend that stabbed in the back, or even just someone that tweets, you see that tweet and it's like, I'm done with that person, or I can't stand the person that, whatever it might be. And it just gets a million retweets, a million comments, a million things reassuring that, yeah, I feel the same way.
I mean, we've seen it in all spectrums, whether that's close friends, family, coworkers, where there's this idea around victimhood that comes up a lot. And, we're only seeing that first glance of whatever they're choosing to, share about it. And so it's always like looking at it like, oh no, here we go again.
Right.
Or kind of like that. Am I going to hear more about this, or am I only getting just this little teaser of, the situation?
Right, because they say it's three sides. There's three sides to every story: his side, her side, and the truth. And a lot of times we just hearing your side. That's what it comes down to.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm always like second guessing a little bit when I see something, because I'm like, okay, what is my first initial reaction?
Mm-hmm.
And again, if my closeness to this person, if I know some context, some history, right, I'm like having that like insight of like, like where do we even go from here?
Right. Because there's always, we can always play blame, but it's just, I want to hear everything. Are you sure? It's always good to ask those questions. And I feel like from what you just said, you definitely like to dissect a little bit more, whether it's coming from a friend, a family, or whoever else is spilling that tea. But for those people that are listening, you're probably like, who's that voice? pDubs, I'm hearing something unfamiliar. Today we have on the great, amazing therapist, Savannah. She is a clinical mental health counselor, and she'll be joining us today for this conversation. How we started today was, me saying that person that's usually having trouble, or saying there's trouble going on, or there's trouble stirring, always finding them. And today we give that a name. You guys heard Savannah say victimhood. That addiction is what we're calling it today. Well, accepted addiction is what we call it today. And just to be clear about the difference and what I mean in victim, I'm not saying victim in terms of, the definition in the Webster's dictionary. I'm saying it in terms of victim mode, that consistent blaming, that storytelling that centers, self as this powerless, attention seeking, needing that validation kind of thing. And the reason why we're bringing attention or light to this episode, because it can be addictive, that quick dopamine from attention, or that avoidance of accountability can really become some comfortable identity for a lot of people, whether it be on social media, oversharing, in relationships, as far as drama, friendships, even at work, you can be like, oh my God, my boss has it out for me. Now my coworker has it out for me. Now it's this constant suffering you're putting yourself in. And I really wanted to bring light to that conversation today with you, Savannah, because I feel like there's a need to have this storyline, some kind of drama, some kind of enemy. And you don't really look at yourself. And I want to have someone that really knows what that means and probably deals with that, on a day-to-day with clients, kind of into that conversation. So has there ever been a time for yourself that you caught yourself being the problem, or you didn't want to admit to it yet, or even someone else, or another instance that you thought of as we talked?
Yeah, well, the first thing that kind of comes to mind is around some cultural factors.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I just want to disclose I am Black and also Native American, and my tribe is the Navajo Nation. And there are so many generational traumas, right, associated with these cultural backgrounds that I come from. And so I can speak for myself of understanding some of the disparities that my communities have faced, and not at the blame of ourselves, but these systems, these suppressive systems. And that's where I think I can, call myself out in that victimhood, the victim mentality around, what the colonizer has done to my people, and feeling very strongly the rage associated with that, and there's always mixed emotions with just that cultural context. But I think there comes a time where, right, what does resiliency look like in the midst of, right, that victimhood that's, plagued a lot of your lineage, right? So I think I can speak to that, just in my personal life of, man, my family, going back generations of their suffering, right? You mentioned that earlier, that suffering is real, right? It is real. And I do want to, as I shift into thinking about others, there are situations that people have faced, right? That gives them the title of being a victim.
Yes.
Right. Let's just talk about that.
Hello. Yes.
I don't think here we're trying to dismiss that, that's not your truth or your story.
At all.
Right.
At all.
But, right, the big but, right? Does it become your life? Does it, alter how you see the world? Does it alter how you see yourself? And that's the part that I think is really important to bring up in this discussion, right? Is we're not discrediting or discounting what people have experienced, not their own fault. How you respond to that, though, that is, right, our power and control that we have.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think in other people that I've seen really take on this, victimhood, right, it can become so, I'll say the word, kind of like damaging to what your future self can look like, right? Living in a constant state of that victimhood, right? Your locus of control shifts. I want to talk a lot about learned helplessness, right? Your brain convinces itself, right, that you have no control over your life. And I think that's that huge damaging part for, well, how does my future look then? Right? Is my life a constant story of suffering? Right? So yeah, that's kind of what, comes up when you say to apply it to myself or just apply it to other people. It's really about focusing in on, I want to acknowledge that this is your truth, but I don't think it's your full,
identity.
Endpoint. Yep. Endpoint. This is all of who you are. Right.
I like what you said. You said something that is really nuanced as far as that learned helplessness. How do you know, for someone that's listening, how do you know that you're doing it? Like, how do you know if you're the one that's addicted to the state of victimhood when it comes to that learned helplessness?
Yeah. Well, I think I would first off say there are certain symptoms associated with some mental health, right? Challenges, like when you're in a depressed state, there is a heaviness of powerlessness, helplessness, hopelessness that, comes up when you're in, a depressive episode, right? And so in thinking about how learned helplessness on its own exists outside of it being associated with, again, a mood disorder, right? Where it really stems from is around, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. I know that's like a hot word,
right? Buzzwords, man.
Yes, yes, but it really comes from almost a repeated cycle of not being able to change the outcomes of the suffering that you're having, right? So repeated, like, just negative situations happening, right? Where you get kind of stuck in this box of nothing in my life is ever going to work out. You probably heard that, right? Nothing ever works out for me, always just waiting for that other shoe to drop. Because you feel, again, you have no power or control on how things work out, their circumstances. And I want to kind of, tie a little, this might get some heat, but... Okay. I think there is an idea of learned helplessness that gets indoctrinated in certain religious practices. So
let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk about it, because I think, there's a lot of religions and spiritualities that focus on, right, your story has already been written for you. And I think in that, taking that on, you somewhat give up, right, some of that, in these religious spaces you might hear, like, stop trying to take control over your life, right? Or, just God, it's in God's hands. And I think that shifts people's mentality a little bit with, oh, well, all these things are happening to me and, it's already written. God wouldn't give me anything I couldn't handle, right? But then I think you're teeter-tottering, right, on that line of, oh, well, do I not have any authority or agency, right, in a cause and effect of what happens, right? A lot of people believe in karma. A lot of people believe in different things of that nature. I think religion kind of suppresses that sometimes. And then
I feel like manifestation paralysis is a thing, right? As far as like people have vision boards all over the world, all over their room, or Bibles in the same way all over the room. If you're not doing the work in the same way, religious spirituality, if you're not doing anything, you're not getting anything. You can dream and wish whatever, but if you're not doing anything to make a change, what is it? Insanity. You know what I mean? That's what I think. I just, you could apply, you could have a faith in whatever, but you need to do something with it. You know what I mean? Like,
right. Like, there are, definitely external factors, right, that are happening that can play a role in how your life turns out. But then the internal is still a big factor, right? What are you doing, right? How are you thinking? What do your relationships look like?
Action. I really think it really has a lot to do with, like, when you were speaking earlier, it made me think of like this thing I usually hear. What was it? Like, look what they did to me instead of look what I keep allowing, kind of thing. And I was just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. No, I mean, that statement, right? Of, like, look what they did to me. There's so much like nuance in that, right? Because there is power in acknowledging, right? Acknowledgement of what the reality is, right? But then there were a lot of moving parts that got to that outcome, right? And not that everything had an intention of, I want this to happen to me, right? But there are, factors, right, that, do contribute to certain outcomes, right? Like the cause and effect. That is real. And going back to when I think about that element of learned helplessness again in the space of religion, right? It's more so, the action part of, okay, right? If I am, like, I can give like an example, right? Say and it's going to be a silly example, right? But, you know, say you believe, right, that you want to be, you know, a singer, like, you know, part of the praise and worship team, right? And yet there's no action on your part to maybe learn a new skill or, you know, get your training in, right? Practice with other people. And then you're still believing this, right? Like, okay, God, why don't you want this for me? And yet, right, it's kind of like, why isn't this happening? Oh, I don't have control of if it happens or not. When there is action you can take to, you know, make your, you know, promote your chances, right, of getting to your goal better, right? Absolutely. So that's kind of how I wanted to apply, like, just a simple example like that, right? A lot of, you know, what I hear, like, in regards to my clients, with emphasis on this victimhood or victim mentality, is them it turning to a hyperfixation on suffering. And that part is, it can become so challenging to sit with the client, right, in that space of really, maybe they never got that empathy and attention towards that pain, that grievance. And so it's really finding like the balance. I mean, I don't know if that, you know, speaks to you anyway, like knowing that it's still the acknowledgement of suffering is still an important step in moving through that suffering.
Absolutely. Because I definitely get it. You know, for a lot of us, you know, it started as survival, you know, no one believed you. So you had to scream to be heard. You had to do these things to be heard. But now, you know, especially in the space where you're in with you, they're safe. You know, you don't have to, and you just don't know how to live without that noise. And it can be really difficult and challenging to live without that noise, to live without that drama, to live without that constant suffering cycle. You know, it's like peace is something that is so foreign and uncomfortable.
You're
I'm sorry, what were you saying?
No, I was just gonna say, like, you know, in people making suffering a personality, right? Making suffering, they've only known suffering their whole life. And therefore, anything that is contrary to that feels like a threat, right?
Yes.
Feels like, like that peace. Oh, who's trying to bring peace into my life? No, we don't know that. That's not welcome here.
Ooh.
And I see that a lot because, one, whether it's, you know, grounded in their identity, grounded in, right, needing this as a form of, again, attention, it becomes a little messy, right? Because it's like almost, we want to see you, but we want to see past, right, just this, again, identity of my whole life has been miserable. Right. Because I think our life is so much more, like there's so much more intersectionality of our life.
Yes, nothing's definitive.
Than just our suffering. And there's a big component without the, you know, the feeling, and I always, in some of the traditional indigenous teachings, is with the idea of any form of suffering, right? From like the minor inconvenience to, right, these major disturbances. Sometimes that allows us to see a different form of joy and peace, right, that we maybe might not have been able to tap into if we, you know, didn't have to face potentially these forms of suffering. So that's how I kind of, you know, help my clients see that, you know, there is like making meaning out of whatever, right, your experience has been.
So for someone that, because I know you said earlier, like people sometimes are like, or clients are sometimes like, somebody's trying to bring peace in my life. Oh no, that's not welcome here. For someone that's coming like that, what do you usually, I heard that sigh. What do you usually do, or how does that look for you and navigating that?
Yeah, so I usually do some mirror work with that because I think, right, kind of what would you do if you heard your friend talking like this? Right? Like, no, I'm never going to know peace in my life, right? You probably tell your friend, like, girl, that is not, you know, like, you can have peace in this life. You're going to find, you know, your soulmate. You're going to, you know, get that job. You're going to, you know, meet that financial goal, whatever it is, right? You would probably hype a friend up. So I kind of use that, like, mirroring of, like, what if, you know, your friend was speaking exactly, and I kind of literally give a summary of what I've heard them say in their story of suffering, right? And, you know, it's like a game changer because I think they're like, wow, like I would be mad at my friend if they were just, you know, dwelling in this, right? If they were just not able to see past, right, like this wall. And so that usually is a tool that I use. Of course, sometimes it does require just sitting in that ditch with that person. Right? And because if they never had, right, that acknowledgement in their lives, like no one's ever said, like, man, like, I'm so sorry you went through that.
Yes.
That should have never happened to you. Right? That validation, as you spoke to, that, you know, kind of reassurance that, like, yes, it, you know,
that was a hard time. You went through a hard time. Yeah.
Right. Instead of what maybe they've already heard is, you know, comparing trauma, like, oh, people have it way worse than you. Right. Or you might hear, oh, that made you stronger. You know, that toxic positivity that exists with, you know, the idea of being a victim. Yeah, so there's so much more noise that they might have been hearing that even if it takes a whole session to just sit with, you know, a client in that, usually by the next session, it's a totally different, you know, energy that they're bringing into that space. And so I think that's an important part of, you know, any trauma work. If their victimhood, if their victim mentality comes from, right, those past traumas that they've experienced, then I do feel it's important, right, to acknowledge that, you know, this state of victimhood, you know, I know it's become a coping like mechanism for you, but it's no longer serving you in this reality, right? And in this space that you're looking forward to, that you're, you know, that you have your ideal self, right? That victim mindset might not be needed anymore, right?
It's so interesting that you painted like two options as far as like, you know, painting the picture for the person, you know, allowing them to see it from a third person kind of point of view, you know, outside of themselves, because sometimes we give so much grace to others. We don't give that grace to ourselves until someone else is painting that picture. And you're like, oh my God, I'll give all this love. That cat under the tree, I would save them in a second, but let me be drowning and I would never. Like, what? You think of the amazing plan for the cat, but for yourself, what? But it's just crazy how you I thought about that, as well as like you never think about how others respond to someone else and how they are interacting. Like you might respond a certain way and you think, okay, this is simple. Or, you know, you might respond as far as like, okay, congratulations to someone just telling you about a promotion. While usually, or for that person, it might be, who cares, whatever, so on and so forth. And it's so interesting to think about that and the difference you make in someone's life.
Oh, girl. Yeah. I mean, I think that I never take that lightly. Right?
Absolutely.
The space that I'm providing, the different, because my work is with BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color. And, you know, speaking back to like the cultural factors, right? That, you know, I always kind of set up this like, you know, you have a garden, right, that you're bringing into the space with me, and your garden might have things that you didn't even plant, but they are nonetheless, right, still in your garden. There might be weeds in your garden that we might have to, you know, tend to, and then can we plant new seeds and water them and let them grow over time, right? So I'm always thinking about each, you know, garden that you know, my clients are bringing in, and really seeing each one in, you know, just their unique version of themselves. Because as we know, you know, therapy, mental health is still very much stigmatized, right, in these spaces. And that kind of coincides with like what we're talking about, because, you know, if you don't have a space to work through how strong this like victimhood has become, right, a part of you, then, you know, you're gonna consistently, right, not have the tools, right, not have the supports to help you see, right, a different part of you. Because that you can always be, you know, a victim in parts of yourself, right? But then there's other parts that have to be maybe the survivor, right? There's other parts of you that have to be maybe even that advocate, right? There's other parts of you that need to exist and that are attainable, right? But only if, right, you're open to that, only if you can really be painted the picture of what that looks like for yourself.
Right. And I think also, outside of even just seeking the help for yourself, everything comes down to having a good circle, good support system, good people around you that can be honest enough to tell you and hold you accountable to what exactly might be an issue, you know, might be something that is reoccurring, that they're noticing, that they're not just letting you, you know, be that person that keeps having that cycle. They're noticing, okay, this is affecting you, friend. Hey, how can we address that? For someone that, even you saying, you know, not having those tools, not being open, not being honest enough to accept that accountability. For someone that has a friend that's listening, how would they, you know, compassionately call out someone who's, you know, either addicted to attention of the patterns, or just, you know, that victimhood that we've been talking about? How do you compassionately call that out for somebody, or how can friends or family respond without, you know, enabling or shaming the person?
Yeah, well, I'm going to go back to that idea of acknowledging that person's agency, right? Like empowering them to say, like, hey, you have an ability to influence your life right now, right? You might not have been able to, you know, influence it then, right? Or even in those reoccurring, right, patterns in your life. But right now, right, you have that ability to influence your life. What can you do right now to impact tomorrow? And I think that, like, just sitting in an empowering way, right? Because I think when you're going from, you know, obviously the shaming and the, I hate to say, like, the idea of, you know, people like just downplaying, right? Like, that wasn't really that bad, but you know, that's never gonna work. You know, like I always.
Well, I went through this. Like,
yes.
Okay.
Oh my, yeah, the comparison game too. It's, you know, it's like, it's not about you, right?
Yeah.
How do you just see that person, and again, even just giving them that, like, you got this, like, you have the ability now, and really staying in the now, because looking at that past, right, it's always going to have those strong associations to, you know, being the victim of that story. But what is the now? And I think that's the biggest, you know, tip I can give to individuals is, like, how do you help someone see their agency and their power now?
Wow, that's...
But there is still, with the victimhood, right, that resistance to help. Like, you know, the, you know, constant rejection of people that are trying to, you know, maybe offer some solutions, you know, even when the solutions are, like, you know, unsolicited. But I think, you know, there can be, like, that characteristic of, you know, you just don't think no, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. Right?
That defense, yeah.
Because it's a threat to what that comfortability in the victimhood, right? But I do want to also mention, like, because I know we were talking a little bit about, like, lack of accountability.
Yes.
And this kind of gets a little disillusioned, right? Like, distorted, because when you know, say we're dealing with, you know, a victim of sexual abuse, and, you know, they're struggling with, like, taking accountability, but in our society, you know, the way that they treat I'm just going to say, women in particular around sexual abuse, it's, pushed down their throats to take accountability. But what were you wearing? And, who were you around? And why were you by yourself? Right. I think there is, that part of it that I, just want to discredit right now.
Yes.
That's a different form, right?
Definitely, completely.
Victimness that we're talking about, right?
Yes.
But more or less like how we are referring to lack of ability, and again, the now of things that contribute to maybe certain outcomes. That's where we have to take accountability, right? You might no longer be the, 12, 14-year-old, that was, right, that was, ignorant and didn't know, certain things, right? But now as an adult, right, you can take that agency and say, okay, right, I do know, a little bit, right? Like I gained a little bit of wisdom, and how do I take accountability for it? How do I feel good about all of my actions, right? I can look back and say like, yes, I feel good about that. I did everything in my power and control to maybe try to influence what happened in that situation.
Absolutely, because that's literally what acceptation is about. Like, we're not talking about the literal definition of, being a victim, because at the end of the day, like you said earlier, this is outside of disorders or those external traumas or disorders or PTSD. This is more so meant to kind of place a word on the consistent blaming, the consistent storytelling, the consistent powerlessness after the fact, right? Like after the knowledge, after the tools, after the experience. What are we doing now? Are we still reliving it in different situations through different people? That's what this is about. We're not even taking from these things where, because accidents happen, when we were talking about cause and effect and taking action. Accidents are real. They do happen. And those are the incidents that we're talking about where, biological things might happen, or, you might get molested, raped, whatever, those things. We're not taking at all from those situations, but we're definitely just shedding light on that accountability, because the accountability is taking responsibility for what happened to you, right? And now choosing what you do with it, taking action, and that first part of it, taking that act and moving and what does that mean for you? That's what you and I are trying to bring light to, for anyone that's listening, like, damn, that's kind of me. You outline many steps of how to get out of that victimhood. And sometimes if people around you aren't telling you because they might feel that you are defensive, you might need this conversation. You might need this podcast to listen to, but that's what we're bringing into conversation, not to take from anyone else's experience. Because we all have been in places where, we didn't call for something to happen to us and it made us a victim, but we're not talking about that.
Yes. And just to add to that, I think looking at your own personal growth, right? Not hindering that, right? Not preventing, you to look beyond, right? What has happened to you. Because I think it is very easy, right, to just nonchalantly, or maybe not even nonchalantly, but ignorantly be repeating, right? Just these certain behaviors, right, that don't even align or match with like what is currently going on in your life, but yet you're again replaying those out
because it's familiar.
I'm curious, like with that idea of like being like a pessimist, because I think that kind of comes in here with this victimhood. I was thinking about that in terms of, specifically with BIPOC, right? How, just having that outlook on, life is unfair, right? And, all the problems in my life are due to others.
Yes.
And not any of, due to my personal actions or choices. And that, again, is a literal,
societal.
Yes, it's a societal like weight that I think, a lot of, people in these marginalized communities, become that way towards their outlook on life. And sometimes that is hard. Like if you're, you know, a friend, family member that's trying to, you know, support someone, right? And that, you know, pessimism is just like so heavy, right? Like it's just, you know, you can't even pierce through it at all, right? That is, you know, to that point, I would say, you know, people have to be ready to accept, right, that, you know, form of like, you know, going back to like agency, right? Like people have to be able to, you know, want to pick up their own, you know, their own life and say like, am I able, like, what can I really do right now, right? That just those small, like, okay, I can brush my teeth in the morning. And that will prevent, you know, that will prevent me from, you know, my teeth falling out. Or, you know, I'm gonna make my bed in the morning and that's gonna make me feel good about the day. Those little areas of our locus of control, I think that's what can help break through, right? That barrier of the, you know, being more in that, like mentality of life is unfair. Just practicing little acts of your locus of control.
For yourself, you know, especially coming from a marginalized background, because even for myself, you know, I had to do a lot of unlearning. That's why I got into psychology from a kid. This is the reason why, you know, I have a bipolar older brother, foreign parents. So from a kid, I had to, like as far early as 6, I was like, I want to get in psychology. I was reading the DSM. I'm trying to understand because I was just like, why is my parents are, you know, they're foreigners, so they didn't really understand what to do, and I'm just like, okay, I need to understand this. This is making me go crazy, y'all, because no one ever talks about the effects someone that has mental health has on the family. There's only ever the effects it has on the person that has it, but it can do a lot, you know, on a person in the family. So I don't know, there's a lot of unlearning that I had to do, but I definitely had, you know, moments where I was the person playing the victim, where I was the one that was ignorant to what I was doing until someone had to make me see, what's one thing you feel like you used to blame other people for that you now take accountability for? Because for me, I would say, I feel like I used to be, I wasn't that slow to anger. And then I would blame that. I'm like, and I'm mad because of da. Instead of being like, this person didn't get me mad. I got me mad. I let them get me mad. I allowed them to get me here. You know what I mean? Because it's so easy to be like, and this is what happened. This is the whole story. Da. This is how I reacted. Instead of being like, damn, I really let this person have power over me, bro. Like, oof.
Yeah. I think for me, like if I'm really thinking about it, I would say it's probably like the idea of, you know, feeling like people, how do I say it? Like feeling like people would like always like a pushover type of vibe, right? Like people would always like see me and think they could just like, again, I'm going into the victim talk already. But like seeing how like, you know, I was too nice, right? And like people would use that against me in a way, right? So I felt like sometimes I, you know, became a victim of like, well, like I'm just too nice and like people, you know, don't treat that like well, or, you know, just use, you know, have ill intentions.
Yes.
Right. But then I started realizing, like, well, that's the energy, right? That's my energy that I have power to give to others or not, right? Treat them. Because I do ultimately value treating everyone with, you know, respect and even like that unconditional regard, right? Like I know that's very hard in society today, but I always like to have that as like a strength. And, you know, there was a time in my life where I'm like, man, people are just like taking that and running with it. Yes. It's like walking all over me. And, you know, I was very conflicted. I'm like, okay, do I have to like not have that as a part of like who I am? Or, you know, can I just shift it? And I just chose to shift it, right? And now, you know, it doesn't feel like, oh, this happened to me again. It's more like, oh no, I, was able to give that energy to people that I felt, would hopefully, treat it with dignity and not, and I guess cop out where, I felt it was leading to a certain direction.
Yes,
right?
I was going to say that. Sense. Yes.
Then just know my ground, right? Know my agency in that.
Yeah, because even when you were saying like, oh, it happened to me again. Even when saying that, I was like, it's better that you notice it now than later. You saying that you're taking that agency is like, hey, maybe it's not, oh, this always happened to me. It's now like, okay, I'm noticing that this might be happening. Let me take my agency back. Let me just not. Because even with me, when you were saying it, I was like, T. Because slow to anger, reason why I said it's slow to anger is because I feel like I give the benefit of the doubt a lot because I just feel like at the end of the day, it's like, why not? I give grace because it's just, I don't know. I trust and love, and it's like, why not? And if you want to show me another side, just show that, and I can do what I want with that after. But that taking advantage of, that's when I get angry. That's when I get mad. That's when I feel that blood boiling. I'm like, wait, not again. But it's like, girl, yeah, the benefit of doubt in me is what I love. I don't want to be this person that has the defense on immediately, my arms against my chest when you meet me. Like, I like to learn as I go. And if you're going to show me eventually, then that's okay. That's who I am. And that's what I've learned to love. But I'm not going to take the victim mentality of being like, oh, I hear this person go, show me their true colors, and I'm not being a good judge of character again. No. Pay attention. You gave person benefit out. You're being open because you are open. And sometimes people are placed in your life to show you. They said a reason or a season, right? And that's okay. And that's fine.
Yeah. And I think I love how those kind of like interconnected a little bit, because I think you have the power to pivot. Like, okay, pivot out of that situation because, you are no longer, right, in that same, whether you've struggled with, right, those same patterns happening. You do have the opportunity to learn from that, right? You do have the opportunity to pivot. You do have the opportunity to even, again, test other hypotheses, right? Like, do I have to totally shift, like me being this just nice person right off the bat? Or, right, can I, look at the spaces that I'm in and see, right, like, seeing that like awareness of, and it's not even like a hyper vigilance. I think it's more so like, right,
observance.
Being aware, right, being aware.
I think being aware is okay. A lot of people aren't, or they're not using it to the best ability, and that's okay. Like, you have to pay attention to your intuition. Sometimes your gut is literally there. Your gut is here for a reason. Those intuition, the feelings that you feel, are here to not be ignored. And that's what I think it comes down to. We all outgrow our own drama. And sometimes, peace starts to feel better than just being right or just choosing to be in certain situations that aren't conducive to who we are or trying to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, there's so much to even say about, if people feel they're allowed to have peace. And that's, I think some of the survival mode speaks to that. When we're in that stress response, there's typical stress responses of, the fight where you're like, okay, I have what it takes to address this threat, right? There's the flight where you're like, I gotta run because no, we don't have what it takes to address this threat. There's the freeze, right? Which is where you feel like your nervous system is just overwhelmed and you are just in a state of, feeling stuck, right? And feeling numb, emotionally withdrawn. And then we have the fawning, which is that good old, like, what can I do to appease the threat, right? That's like the people pleaser, right? That's the, no boundaries, right? Type of stress response. So in thinking about those different stress responses and what version of your survival shows up, right? I think we really have to look at, right, like what is the threat at hand, right? And am I, like, going back into, like, the victimhood of it, right? Like, does this threat really have that same power over me?
Put on a shirt. Love that.
Right. Like, does that threat still have the same power over me? Right. Like, I automatically think of, I don't know why it's coming up, but I think of, like, you know, I had a very conflicting relationship with my dad, and we've done a lot of work to get to where we are at. But I remember, you know, like, feeling a certain, you know, like, fear, like, intimidation of, like, you know, what he would think of my decisions, right? And even if I felt, like, super confident, like, in my decisions, like, I was like, oh my gosh, well, what is my dad gonna think?
Oh Lord.
But I mean, I think, like, as I got, you know, older, it's like that threat was not even, like, it was irrelevant to me. Like, it didn't have as much of that, like, influence on me anymore, right? And I think I broke out of that, like, victimhood of, like, you know, you know, dad has the final say, or, you know, all those, like, machismo and, like, the, you know, Latin communities. And, like,
absolutely.
You know, I broke out of that victimhood of that, you know, as I got older.
And that could be so hard to do, you know, because even, like, I kind of, like, had this conversation with my friend. But we're, you know, my friend, they're a person of color as well, and they're of Caribbean descent, and they live with their partner. They're in a gay relationship, and now, you know, being that they're in a Caribbean relationship, sometimes, you know, Caribbeans can have their own kind of stereotypes and things behind it. So him finally, you know, he's been in the closet his whole life. So finally, him being with his partner, living with him, fully living his full truth, sometimes it really eats at him, and he's like, oh, you know, I really wish they could be like this, or they could receive me, support me. And I'm just like, hey, babe, like, I understand you want that love, and, you know, it can be quick and it hurts a lot, but in no way does your family help you today. In no way does your family keep your life moving. The car you have, the apartment you have, the food in your fridge, everything you have, in no way is from support of your family. And it's hard. It's sad. And, you know, you do want the acceptance, belonging of your family, and these certain nuclear things that we started with. But reality, it's not an ideal world, you know?
Yeah. It's not. And I think, right, like, going back to those marginalized groups, right, being, even in our society, right, like, the more we claim to that victimhood, the less, you know, we see our true power, right, our true, like, role.
What we can blossom to, like, what is our next level after this? Because I imagine you probably grew so much that you were like, you know what, Dad, and kind of, like, close that chapter, and a whole new one opened up. It's always that way.
Exactly.
It's always that way.
Oof. It really is. It really is. And I think, especially as a collective, right, as we, and maybe, you know, you've seen this, but I think in this, because I'm a millennial, zillennial, I think that's what the actual term is. But we have the Gen Zs, the millennials, right? And I think that, you know, these generations are more and more adopting, you know, a new idea around this, right? In the, like, from what I've seen it, right, with my teams that I work with, it's kind of like, you know, it's almost like sometimes too, I don't want to say like too, like, they're not bothered, like unbothered.
Yes.
Like, kind of like, oh, that happened, so well, like, I can do this today.
Yes.
You know, like, there are, you know, they're
numb,
like,
in a way, numb.
Paradigm.
Like,
yes.
I'm serious, because I see that my parents are Nigerian, so it's like, yeah, I'm numb to the reality of the world and all the bad things that happen. It's like, girl, no, this is bad.
yes. So it's, I see, you know, like, a different paradigm, like, shift there. but I also am, wanting to like usher in empathy, right?
Yes,
Usher in,
yes.
right, that this, victimhood is actually taught a lot of the time, right? Like, in our victimhood is, maybe in certain unstable environments, right, where suffering is rewarded, right? That is, boom, one-on-one for, again, how you're going to then adopt victimhood into your adult life, right? And, just reinforcing, right, that, your control, that you have a lack of control all the time, right? So I think in thinking about that victimhood, being like learned, right? It's taught, right? Going back to our family systems, like how do we then say like, oh, I'm no longer, living under that maybe that roof, or I'm no longer having to listen only to right my parents or my older siblings or whoever was your caretaker growing up.
Yeah, they're no longer my authority, so why are they still ruling my life?
Exactly. So I think that's like really important to just point out too, right? Is that it is learned, right? Even if you, didn't maybe experience these certain things, if your parents grew up with, we're the victims, they did this to us, they, which I know that is a lot of in the culture context, right? I have family from Inglewood, California, that to this day, right, have their feelings towards police, and I think it's there's validity in it, but then again, how is it teetering on the line of right that victimhood, right, and how is that damaging their ability to have personal growth, right? Outside of the external factors, because we can't control what is outside of us,
right? But the things that we can is what we're bringing to the surface today. Absolutely. Exactly. Oof. Thank you so much, Savannah. I feel like oh my gosh, there's so many gems dropped in this episode. There's so much for those of you that are listening and you're like, okay, maybe that's something that's always been going on is me. Thank you so much for this episode, Savannah. I feel like you added so much information, wisdom, and knowledge for people to just take with them. I know that before we got in this conversation, you said that you were, pretty much booked and busy. I know that y'all heard this. You're like, I need to get this girl on the calendar, but she is booked and busy. But every episode we do have, whether it be an excerpt from a book, whether it be a song, a movie, just something that can further educate or just have people dissect when it comes to this topic or accepted addiction. So for you, being that she's booked and busy, do you think that would you offer or recommend any book or song or movie?
Absolutely. Yay. Yeah. So one book that was already coming up for me is this book called No Bad Parts.
Okay.
And it's about really like, a lot of healing and restoring wholeness, but coming from a like internal family system, model. But it's from Richard Swartz. But I can send it to you and you can plug it somehow.
Yes.
I really like the idea around this no bad parts, because even if victimhood is a part of you, right? How do you, rebuild that relationship with that? Right? Can you acknowledge that you were a victim, but it's, you're not in that victim mentality, right? So I love that, this book really, just highlights how all these, like, from our inner critics to, our self-sabotagers to our procrastinators to, all those parts of us that exist, like the nuances, because we are, again, intersectionality, like there's so many different parts that are co-occurring together. And how do we, again, address those and be more kind to them, and again, kind of foster new relationships with those parts. And then again, also tell those parts that no longer need to, like, we don't need them anymore, right? So this book really helps with that too. So yeah, I'll give that, and I mean, There's so much out there. Maybe I'll just send some to you and plug them because I'm not remembering them off like the top of my head right now.
No, that's amazing. Thank you so much for No Bad Parts. I really I really want to check it out. It sounds like it's about, really those category you might fit in. And then once you find out that category, your fix is right after.
Mm-hmm. Yes, right. The healing, right? I would say, right?
You're healing.
We're not broken.
We're not broken.
We're not broken. We do not need to be fixed.
Absolutely.
We just need to heal some parts. We need to repair some parts, right? That have maybe, faced hurt, maybe faced, grief, right? All those parts that just need a little TLC, right?
Thank you for that. Thank you for even changing my wording. So I really think words are power, and even you just saying something as small as fix made a big difference in the conversation. So thank you for changing that. Is there anything you want to leave us with? Because the mic is hot.
It is. I mean, I do want to at least offer, if anyone wants to debrief, I'd be happy to open, my Instagram DMs and, kind of just invite that space for any further questions. Pro bono, right? I'm not going to charge you, but yeah, I think that's just important to, if you have any questions that you still want to throw on the sounding board, I, want to offer myself in doing that. And knowing that we are, as we're learning and becoming more aware of ourselves, that's where the true journey starts, right? We can't change what we don't know, right? So when we are, having this self-reflection, when we're having, these discussions maybe with our support groups, really knowing those are the stepping stones to growth, right? And it's a journey. It is a continuous journey. I wish it was, all right, we had the talk and, you go to sleep at night and everything's just going to be, rainbows and butterflies.
Right.
Wake up. But, that's not the reality of how us as humans work. So, really not selling yourself short if you don't see that immediate, validation of, oh, I've changed, right? I always tell my clients to keep maybe if those certain patterns, keep track of what you're noticing in your relationships with others, with yourself. So that way you can see that, gradual growth versus, not believing that anything is changing. And then in tune, maybe, double downing on that victimhood again. Right? Because I guess I'll leave it with that.
I appreciate that. Because like you said, maybe you heard something today that was you, but it's not about beating yourself up, right? It's about deciding to make that change and tracking that progress. Because that's the only way to know and reflect that you're doing something to make that change, to be the difference you see that you want. So, thank you so much for today. Just decide that today's the day you want to not completely end the pattern, but make a change to making a difference in that pattern,
Yes. And thank you for, the invite. I'm always open to these type of discussions. I mean, I think whether it's through a podcast, I am really considering, just putting this out there, a free support group, I don't know, process talk group, and really just giving a space to process what we're all going through as a collective. It's just a lot.
Oh, we have to talk. Oh, we got to talk after this. People just know it's more coming after this now.
Yes, absolutely.
Because that's, now that I know this, even you offering the pro bono services, the information, everyone who's listening, her information is going to be in the description today, as well as that book called No Bad Parts and the episodes playlist. But we definitely have some work to do knowing this now, Savannah. I'm going to hold you to it.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
No, let's do it.
Yes.
It's a season, especially with what we're going through, what we're facing.
Yes.
It's necessary. It really is. So
I'm excited. I'm excited for all that we have. Woo, yeah. We're not going to say too much. We're going to end it here, but me and you definitely have a lot of talking to do. Thank you all for joining me today. to the lives we lead, to the moments we make, to the dreams we wish, and to the fucked up shit we can't erase. Cheers to us. Catch pDubs next time on Accepted Addictions. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and I'll see you all next week.
Welcome to Accepted Addictions with pDubs. Get ready to immerse yourself in a podcast that's open to people of all stripes and persuasions. Accepted Addictions is not just a podcast, it's a movement. We go over societal norms that are considered acceptable, but are often toxic to our growth, development, and even behavior. This is a platform where we explore the multifaceted identities within ourselves, recognizing that some versions have it all figured out, while others lean into that negativity. This is Accepted Addictions, where every version of you, every evolution of you, is not just embraced, but celebrated. So sit back, open your ears, grab a drink. You know I'll be sipping on my kombucha, and prepare for an engaging journey.
Well, everything that's supposed to be bad make me feel so good. Everything they told me not to do was exactly what I would. Man, I tried to stop, man, I tried the best I could, but what your addiction is Accepted Addictions with pDubs.